كنا ابتدينا مع بعض تشارلز ديكنز أوليفر تويست. بس ما تنسوش تعملوا لايك وتعملوا شير لو حابين ان الناس كلها تستفيد اللي هم بيدرسوا أوليفر تويست باي تشارلز ديكنز. لو حابين توصل لكم فيديوهات مني كتير فعلوا الجرس. مش شايفة تفاعل كتير فمش عارفة أكمل لكم سلسلة تشارلز ديكنز ولا ما كملش. لو حابين تكملوها اكتبوا لي في الكومنتس، اعملوا لايك، اعملوا شير، اعملوا سبسكريبشنز عشان أقدر أكمل لكم سلسلة تشارلز ديكنز ونخلصها مع بعض ونقراها كمان. طيب كنا بدأنا في قرينا شوية في تشارلز ديكنز chapter 1 بس مخلصناهوش طبعا. it was a little bit long فعشان مساحة الفيديو I'm going to divide it into 2 or 3 videos according. هندردش كده مع بعض شوية generally about the chapter. احنا اتفقنا ان اي story it should have a setting, it should have characters, it should have a plot. البلوت وقلنا يعني ايه characters واتكلمنا يعني ايه السيتنج واتكلمنا يعني ايه البلوت في الفيديو the previous video بتاع امبارح لو كنتوا شفتوه. هيرجعوا له it's in detailed. طيب القصة بتاعتنا النهاردة السيتنج بتاعها where does it take place. السيتنج عندي either time and or place or both الاتنين مع بعض. طيب البليس بتاعها takes place in England أو London mainly. وإمتى it happened? When did it happen? It was during the Industrial Revolution. It was during the Industrial Revolution. وفي خلال الإندستريال ريفولوشن دي أو الثورة الصناعية في الوقت دوت حصل تغيرات كتير، وقلنا إن الوقت بيغير كتير من الشخصيات. والوقت بتاع الإندستريال ريفولوشن الناس كلها يعني mostly people especially rich people وده كان سبب القصص اللي بدأت في الوقت ده. وقلنا ان دايما mainly the aim of writing is to reform, is to change. طيب هو ايه اللي حصل في industrial revolution that made Charles Dickens wants to reform the people, wants to make a change, wants to make something that make them wake up، حاجة تصحيهم كده. الاندستريال ريفوليوشن لما حصلت الناس كتير جدا بقت أغنياء. lots of people became rich and lots of people became very poor. وبدأ فيهم طابع الميكنة. يعني ايه؟ they became like machines. they don't have feelings. they stopped to feel each other. they were only thinking about money. They want money, 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 factories, machines, working, and that's it. What happened that the rich people, the owners of the factories, the owners of the machines, the noblemen, started to become very, very, very rich. And during these periods of becoming very rich, they started to be very materialistic. Materialistic يعني they care only about money. ما يفكروش إلا بس في الفلوس. And what happened later that they during this period they completely forgot about the poor people. So you find lots of people are eating croissant and lots of people are starving, are dying out of hunger. بيموتوا من الجوع. ناس عمالة عايشة حياتها very luxury in a luxurious way، وناس تانية luxurious يعني رفاهية، وناس تانية يا حرام they are starving. بيموتوا من الجوع. they don't have anything to eat but water, and maybe they wouldn't find water even. Okay, so the story of Charles Dickens Oliver Twist happens in London during the industrial revolution. How much time passed from beginning of the chapter until the end? The story happens in 9 years. And what are the three places that Oliver lived in? احنا عرفنا ان Oliver at first he lived in the orphanage where with Mrs. Mann. هو أول حاجة he was born in the workhouse, and we knew that the one who gave him his name was Mr. Pumple, the intelligent Mr. Pumple, as Mrs. Mann was mocking or making fun of him. And then he was moved to the orphanage. orphanage دوت اللي هو بيت الأيتام with Mrs. Mann. Mrs. Mann is a complete materialistic or a complete image of the industrial age, because she is supposed to care of the orphans, the poor children who are in a deep need of love, care, emotions. But she gave them nothing, even food. She was eating the food. She was only caring about counting the pennies, how much money she will have. And this was a clear image for materialism at this age. He was moved when he was 9 years old. He moved to the workhouse back to Mr. Pumple. So now Oliver's twist was born in workhouse, then the orphanage, then back again to the workhouse when he was 9 years old. And finally, he lived in a coffin maker's house with Mr. Sawapuri, which we will know later about him. The best place where Oliver lived in was in the orphanage with Mrs. Mann, where he had friends. And though it was a very poor living, but he was having friends. And Charles Dickens was showing the importance of having friends, to show the importance of emotion, to show the importance of love. Life is not only money. I need someone to care about me. So the only one who was caring about Oliver in the orphanage, of course, was not Mrs. Mann, but it was Oliver with Oliver's friends. He didn't have to work at the time because he was young. And the worst place where Oliver has undertaken the worst life ever he had in his life, where was in the undertaker's house, or Mr. Salisbury's house, where he had to sleep among coffins, among dead people. Type. What is workhouse? ايه الworkhouse ده اللي هيروحوا حبيبي Oliver? I love this boy so much. Hopefully that you would love the story too. The workhouse is a place for poor people who don't have money or a place to live. يعني supposedly it's a place for the poor where you offer help to them to live an acceptable life, يعني حياة مقبولة. Okay, so workhouse is a place for the poor people, is a place for the poor who don't have money or a place to live. Okay? Why Oliver Twist was raised in an orphanage? We said that Oliver Twist was raised in an orphanage because his mother died right after giving birth to him. Okay, if I want you to talk a little bit about the character of Mrs. Mann, think about Mrs. Mann and write to me in the comments. Think about the most important theme in chapter 1. What are the most important themes in chapter 1? Of course, Oliver's miserable life. As we said, it was the age of industry, the age of materialism, the age of money. So there was dishonesty. People were not honest at the time. And this what we have seen in Mrs. Mann's character and in Mr. Pumple, how she was how she was hypocrite when she was flirting Mr. Pumple and talking about his intelligence, while she was sure that he was stupid. She was making fun of him. Cruelty. Cruelty. We have seen the cruelty of the people at the time, how people were cruel. And this was seen in Mrs. Mann's way of treating the orphans while eating their food and taking the money. And at the same time, we will see the God's protection theme or the divine care. Divine care means العناية الإلهية. It's only God who will help you. ودي كانت دفعة إيمانية from Charles Dickens. He wants people to believe more in God, to go back to God. God is more important than money. God who will give you life. God who will save you, not only money. So we will see God's protection to Oliver throughout his journey. It's the main story, or the main theme in the story is God's protection or divine care. Oliver didn't die, but he was white, he was pale, and he was always hungry. But God protected him, protected his soul. Of course, we have lots of themes like hypocrisy, like corruption of society. Corruption of society, Mrs. Mann, Mr. Pumple, all of these are clear images for hypocrisy. Okay? Of course, throughout the story, the narrator's voice, outside or inside the text. The narrator voice is the voice that is outside the novel. We don't know the narrator. It's someone that he has a clear image of all what is happening. He can see everything. He can see even what the character are thinking about. Okay? It's mainly in the third point of view or method of narration. The children's point of view is mainly employed throughout the story, and the narrators feel pity for the boys, showing an ironical dislike for the adults' world. And why he chose Charles Dickens to convey or to write his story children's world to show how cruelty kills and destroys purity. عايز يورينا قد ايه ان عالم الماتيرياليزم اللي هو عالم الهيبوكريسي، اللي هو عالم الاندستري، اللي هو عالم الكبار، قتل البراءة اللي جوه كل انسان، جوه طفل. everyone جواه child. مفيش واحد كبير ومش جواه حاجة بريئة. بس during that age all this purity was being killed, was being destroyed by the cruelty of the industrial age. So very quickly, Oliver was born in the workhouse, the house of the poor who have no money and nowhere to live. Oliver was miserable the moment he was born. His mother died and they dressed him in the very old clothes of the workhouse. Oliver then was sent to Mrs. Mann, a place where he should find hope for living, but unfortunately it was a place where he found poverty, humiliation. Mrs. Mann was a dishonest person. She was given few pennies to look after the parentless children or the orphanage, but she kept most of the money for herself. She was eating their food. She was giving nothing, even love, which is something that you don't buy, you don't have to pay for it. She was very mither. She doesn't give them any love. Mrs. Mann was cruel. She beat Oliver. She beat the two other boys. Then she put them in the dark room for saying that they were hungry. She were even cruel to them that she was not giving them a space to talk, to express the feelings of their hungers, not even the feelings of their hearts. She treated Oliver only very good, in a good way, only in front of Mr. Pumple. Clear image of hypocrisy. And Oliver was a clever and wise boy. He too used the same way of hypocrisy to Mrs. Mann. When she gave him a nasty look, he was very afraid of her. And he pretended to be so sorry to leave this woman. But in real, he was very happy that he was going to leave this place, but he didn't know that he was going to a worse place. Oliver moved to the workhouse at the age of 9. If you look at this image of exaggeration, how people were not allowed to express their feelings or to talk about anything in their life, they are not allowed. They are not allowed. So Oliver, Charles Dickens saw this image of exaggeration يعني مبالغ فيها, but he wants people to feel that there's something wrong happen. The master hit Oliver with his spoon, then seized him in his arms and cried for help, Mr. Bumble! And some of the workhouse officers came rushing into the room. And why all of this? Because Oliver just said that he was hungry. The master told them what Oliver had said. He asked for more. Do we understand that he wanted more than his usual supper? And his supper, if you remember, it was nothing but a soup of water. That boy will live to be hanged. They will hang him only because he was a little bit hungry or he wanted some more food. They took Oliver, poor Oliver, away and shut him up in a dark room. The next morning, a note appeared on the gate of the workhouse. These notes offered £5 to anybody who would take Oliver Twist. I'm sure that the boy will live to be hanged. Now they started to, you see how materialistic the people, they're selling the boy for £5 and he worth only 5 pounds. They were thinking only about money, okay? And this was the next step, or the third step in Oliver's life when he moved to another place for the one who bought him. Oliver, during all that time, was a prisoner in the dark room for a whole week. The weather was cold. Every morning he was taken to wash in the yard. Mr. Pumple beat him with a stick. Every other day he was taken into the hall where the boys had their soup, and Mr. Pumble beat him in front of everybody. Why he was doing this? Why he was humiliating? Theme of humiliation. The boy to that extent, because only he wants people to clothe, to zip their mouths and never ask for more anymore. He cried all the day and couldn't sleep at night. He couldn't sleep at night because of pain. All that time, nobody came to pay 5 pounds to Mr. Bumble, and Mr. Bumble decided to arrange for him to go to sea and work on ship. Now, the undertaker, Mr. Sowerberry, who was tall man and wore an old black suit. He made coffin boxes in which dead bodies were put. Many of his coffins were for the poor people who died in the workhouse. How miserable the life that Oliver is going to take. Mr. Sowerberry says, I have prepared the coffins for the two women who died last night, said Mr. Sowerberry to Mr. Pumple. I'm sure that you make a lot of money from your work. This what he was not sorry for the two women who died, but he was caring about how much money Mr. Sowerberry gains. Sowerberry, do you think so? The price allowed the workhouse are very small, Mr. Pumple. Mr. Pumble now will say that you don't know anybody who wants a boy. He wants to sell poor Oliver for 5 pounds. And now it's the time that Mr. Sowerberry will offer to take him. He made it out of kindness. He wants to help the boy. That's why he will take Mr. Sowerberry. Throughout the coming chapters, we will see that Mr. Sowerberry was a kind person, and that's why he offered to help Oliver. I wanted to speak to you about, said Mr. Sowerberry. I do a lot to help the poor people, so I think I have a right to get something from them. I think I will take the boy myself. We will stop here and we will continue it in the other videos. If you want to understand anything, or if you have any other questions, any more questions, don't hesitate to write to me in the comments. Best of luck.